Lead with Legacy, the official podcast of IOL Global. Here, we will explore leadership that outlives titles and trends. Through conversations with faith-based and marketplace leaders, we will discuss integrity, conviction, and purpose. To learn more about us, visit us at iolglobal.com. Hello, and welcome to this episode of Lead with Legacy. I am so excited today. I have with me Sloane Lott, my Director of Operations, who is incredible, but we have a very special guest today, Mr. Chris McClure. So this is Chris's second time on our podcast, he's our first second timer. I don't know, we should probably give you some kind of award or something. We should probably get a plaque.
Man, do I get some kind of do I get a badge or something?
I know. I should really think about that. I should have our Director of Operations think about that. Yeah, so you're our second time guest, but I don't think that it'll be your last time on, for one. And I think we'll have some other second time arounders too. We've had several of our guests contact us, be like, hey, can we do that again? And so it's always good conversation. Before we get started, if you're listening, I'm going to do a shameless plug. Take a moment, like and subscribe us, or, follow us on whatever your favorite platform. I think Sloane's got us pretty much everywhere now. So you can listen to us if you dare on any platform that's out there. And we just really hope that these conversations bring life and leadership skills and information to the people that are listening. It's just meant to be a fun conversation. Also, we'll have the information below this. You can contact Chris and you can get a hold of him. You can follow him on LinkedIn and Facebook. And so we're going to talk about, Chris, what you do and what you have going on and why you're here. So let me just be clear. The last time you were on with my dad, Dr. Chambers, and Dr. Leander, who is one of our other strategic partners. And you guys got to have a really great conversation. But Sloane and I were left out of that conversation. And so we said, we want to have Chris back and we want to talk to him. So you tell us a little about who you are, what do you do, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for letting me come back twice. That's great. I guess the first one went well if I got to come back twice.
Hey,
so that's good.
Yeah, that's a good indicator.
It was fun to be with your dad and Brian because they, as we shared in that episode, it was a kind of a full circle moment for us working together 17, 18 years ago, even back in the day. But no, so I was a pastor for 20 years and it wasn't a hard line for me of shifting from being a pastor to my leadership business. Back in 2015, I ended up joining the John Maxwell Leadership Certification Program. I was in really a very challenging leadership spot as a pastor in the role I was in. We were dealing with some internal conflict at our church where we were dealing with among the staff and leadership. And it was one of those moments where I would say I say now God used it to kick me out of the nest that I wouldn't have probably flown out of without the conflict.
Yeah.
But even going back to when I was working with your dad and Brian back in 2008, 2009 timeframe, I started to have this leaning toward the business community I couldn't explain it. I just was drawn to the business community and I didn't know why, because I went to college to be a youth pastor, ended up transitioning to more of an associate and executive pastor roles. And then all of a sudden I had this business prompting and I was like, Lord, what is this all about? And I couldn't figure it out. It made no sense because I didn't have a business degree. I never had done anything in business, thought I'd be terrible, blah, 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 right? Had all the self-doubt and self-talk stuff, right? But through that challenging situation back in 2014, 2015, and I started really seeking the Lord, saying God, if I'm not doing this, what I'm doing right now, what would I be doing? Where would you want me to go? And I started interviewing some local leaders that were nonprofit executives, that were corporate leaders. I went to Wright State University, which is here in the Dayton area where I am. Met with them about Master of Organizational Leadership, trying to just explore, what would I do if I wasn't continuing to do what I'm doing, right? And I believe God connected me to a local woman who was a part of the Maxwell organization. And I said, I known about the program, from a distance, but not really fully. And I just said to her, hey, Christy, what is this about? Let's talk. So anyway, she helped me understand what it was. And long story short, that was beginning of 2015. By June of 2015, I joined the Maxwell Leadership Program. And then at that point, I was thinking more about skill development of, it's just something I could do to kind of put on my resume, right? To go find a different job if I needed to or whatever. And then I had a client. I had a friend of mine said, "Well, why don't you do some would you come work with my team?" And
Mhm.
I was like, "Huh, I better actually start a business if people actually wanna pay me." So, take in mind, I'm full-time at my church, dealing with a bunch of, leadership conflict and starting a business, and I didn't know what the heck I was doing.
Same.
So so maybe some people out there can identify, like, you
Yeah.
take that step and you don't know where you're going, right? So that was 2015. Progressively for the next 4 years, I was doing my business, trying to figure out business building, trying to understand that. Every time I kept running into like, well, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to promote myself, market myself, all these things, right? And so by 2019, I got to the point where a friend of mine, actually, a good friend of mine, he was one of our elders at our church that I was working with, and he said, "Chris, something's got to give. I can watch you being pulled in directions. My family at that time was middle school and elementary age. My kids we were very busy and active as a family in sports and activities, all that, right? So he's looking like your family, the church, your business, all these things. And he's like, and I said, well, and I knew in my heart that it was time to let go,
Yeah.
but it was hard, right? Like it, I didn't, it was a step of faith to let go. So that was like early night 2019. I resigned in March with like, I think my end date was in May sometime. And I stepped out and I just went with it with my leadership coaching business and started just working with I was working with IT companies,
Mhm.
nonprofits, small businesses. I didn't really have I still don't really have a specific niche that I focus on per se, like an industry. It's more about, I'll say, the demographic of the small business and, teams that they don't have like a big robust HR department and have trainers and everything. They're looking for that outside help. Um, and so I did that, but then COVID hit. So I was doing really well. Like, I had a couple of big contracts. I felt like things were humming along. I could feel the momentum. And then COVID hit, and my one big contract kept going, but we were pivoting into the digital virtual side of things because
Right.
they weren't meeting in the office. Another company that I've been working with for 3 years, they said, we need to stop it was like a 6-month workshop kind of a program that we were doing. They were like, we need to end it for now. And so we had a stopping point, and we never went back to that.
Mm.
So all of a sudden I'm back to, what do I do? Like,
Right.
I stepped out a year later. Here's all this, collision in the world, everything. And so then I'm back to kind of not square one, but it felt like that. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was simultaneously in 2020, I joined our local chamber of commerce board, and 3 months later, COVID hit. So I was all excited about being on the board and helping with the community
Yeah.
businesses, and then COVID disrupted everything for that next year. 2021 comes around, and the staff at the chamber, which was a small office, left. They went to different opportunities, and we had an emergency meeting, and our current CEO and president, she was our vice chair of the board. She said, "I'd like to be considered for this position," because she was very active in the community. She was a realtor, and she was very, had a heart for the local businesses. So we hired her, and I was a part of hiring her on the board. And then we got out of that meeting, and I said, "Hey, I'd like to talk to you about maybe working together on this," because we had another position. It was an operations manager type
Right.
role at the time. And so we sat down and we kind of had a common shared vision of helping our local businesses. And, for me, I looked at it as maybe this is like a couple year thing, and it's like a temporary stopgap that God was providing for me to still keep in the business community, still do what I do, but being, having the chamber, day job to work with. And so that was kind of my focus and my thought at the time. Now I've been there, it'll be 5 years this summer. My role transitioned into vice president, so that really I handle the marketing, the member relation, a lot of the thing,
Yeah.
it's kind of a COO type role for me in what we do, kind of making sure everything's happening. But it's been a platform for me to really help a lot of small business
Yeah.
leaders and owners and really sit down and help them be strategic. So for me, it's been this winding journey from full-time ministry and build a business to full-time business to my business kind of getting disrupted to now the chamber job and my business. And I've wrestled with it, to be quite honest,
Yeah.
because I thought, God, I thought we were going all in here. And then and it was like disruption or challenge or roadblock. And yet what I started to see, and I've had some very special friends and mentors around me say, Chris, you got help me, I guess, get with my perspective, right? And it's seeing each opportunity as a platform, not just as like, it's not a failure that my business had a COVID disruption,
Right.
but it did make me pivot, right? It did make me adjust. And the chamber job isn't like, it's not me being a failure because I'm working at the chamber now. It's like,
Yeah.
no, we have 600 business members and lots of community relations. Like, I'm more engaged in our community than I ever was before because of just the job in itself and the people. So all these relationships, all the things, the influence and the impact in the community. So for me, it's been a journey of learning, you know, my own skill set, learning different, the chamber's actually taught me a lot of different things to help my business,
Sure. Yeah.
and it's been mutually beneficial. I'll be reading books and I'll be thinking about, well, one half my brain is my business, the other half of my brain is how can this apply in the chamber? And
Yeah.
so it's been kind of fun because they're so interconnected now. So that's kind of a long, I guess, story of where I am, but I work with small business owners from a one-on-one coaching side of things. I train their teams in leadership development. I've written 2 books that we'll talk about as well. I mean, I honestly, it's like, if that whole question of like, if money were no object, what would you do? And I'm really at the place where I would be doing what I'm doing.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing though, how God does that? Like you think you have these plans. We were talking about this before we came on the recording. Like, I'm a planner. I love to plan, I want everything planned out. And then God's like, well, I want to do something a little different. And so, I think when you got kind of shifted on that trajectory with COVID, God still had a plan, right? He still knew that there was going to be things going on for you and that there was a trajectory there. It was just a little different than you thought it was. And so
100%.
yeah, so the things you've been doing have been really amazing. And yeah, what an incredible opportunity to be that involved and that immersed in the chamber though, having this
Mhm.
vision long ago that you were going to, work with businesses and you are working with businesses. And so sometimes it's not, I think that's important to know. It's like we know it. But when we're walking through it, it's a little difficult to go, oh yeah, well, we don't have to, we can go left if we're planning on going right. And
Yeah.
it's really about what God's telling you to do in the moment. And that sounds cliche sometimes too, right? Because when we're walking through, like, well, I don't hear what God's telling me to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what he's saying. But you have to, I think it's important, and this is something I've been learning through this process with IOL too, is taking that time to stop and just spend the time with God and take a walk or just sit down and read the word and just really try to listen to what is he saying, because sometimes it's really really clear and other times it's really not. Like hiring Sloane, that was really, really clear. There's other things that are really not. And then, we pray about things together and try to do that as a team. I know, when we were kind of going back and forth talking some things with you, I had you on my heart and I had been praying. Our family had been praying and I just reached out and I was like, listen, I think we should have some partnership here and I think it would be beneficial. And so I think it's important that we stop and we listen sometimes rather than just I'm a very in my head noisy person, and so I have to clear my head a little bit. So
Well, I just gotta say real quick, it's interesting because years ago, and it's probably been 8 or 9 years ago now, honestly, but I was doing like I'd walk around my neighborhood and I'd kind of prayer walk and just pray, and it wasn't anything super, but I was literally like struggling one day, and I felt like, and I'd really just read, and I think I even heard a message. Stephen Furtick did a message years ago called "Don't Stop on Six,"
mm,
and it's about the Israelites marching around the walls of Jericho and that story in the Bible, right? And so I go out and it's about a mile walk around the loop that I take in my neighborhood. So I went out and I was just walking and praying. And I was really in that tough out, like, Lord, provision, what am I doing? All this, stuff. And I made a lap around the neighborhood and I felt like the Lord said, take another lap. And I'm like, okay. So my brain goes to, am I walking 7 miles today around this neighborhood, right? Like, so then I go and I do the second lap and it's like, and I felt like the Lord was like, take another lap. And I'm like, here we go. I'm like, so anyway, on that third lap, the thing that I felt like the Lord really impressed me, he's like, Chris, you're worried so much about being the financial provider and everything being about money to your family. And you are so much more than that. But it was in that quiet, like you said, it's getting out of your head that I felt that was like this burden lifted off me, like, "Trust me to provide for you. I've got you. I've got your family. You don't need you're trying to be the provider, trust the provider," right? Like, and so for me, thankfully, I stopped at 3, not 7,
Seven would have
but
been
that was
great though, you know.
yeah, it's definitely yeah, I'm afraid the houses would have fallen down in the neighborhood, I don't know, but no, but it was one of those moments where, to your point of when we don't know and I can sit in my office and sit here and just try to think my way through it, right? And it's like, that doesn't work you get so tangled up but yeah, so you're right. And that's been part of my journey, right? It's been a walk by faith. I mean, there's certain kind of, I'll say, repeatable phrases that God has given me. And, my uncle years ago said, "Chris, just keep moving forward."
Yeah.
And that had stuck in my head for 10 years now. And then, the whole just walk by faith, not by sight. And,
Yeah.
that has been the journey. And I think for a lot of leaders, whether they really identify it as a faith journey they're on, but they really are in some way, shape, or form of, you don't know what tomorrow brings. You don't know when the next disruption's coming, but it's got you can be ready and you can keep succeeding, but you may have to pivot. And actually, just real quick too, I was just rereading a little book that I heard a speaker years ago at a men's event I was at, and it's called GPS Your Success. And he talked about, like the whole GPS analogy of you put your end destination in, but along the way, you may have to recalculate, right? It recalibrates when there's traffic ahead, when there's a wreck, when there's an obstacle in the road, whatever. And he's like, sometimes it's shifting lanes, sometimes it's a different route altogether, but doesn't mean your destination is different. It
Right.
just means how you get between here and there might change. And that's where I think my journey has been is that I wanted and expected a straight line 10 years ago, 11 years ago when I started my business, and it's been the entrepreneur roller coaster, as they say, and there's been lots of twists and turns, but those twists and turns have built me into who I am today, which also now, ironically, when I still feel incompetent or lack of experience, I have people going, "Hey, would you help me with my business in this area?" And I'm like, "Why are you
Yeah.
asking me? Like, what in the world about me makes you think I can help you with that?" And then I realized, no, it's because of all the things I've had to learn and go through. Like, I used to hate marketing. Marketing was a curse word to me. And then one day the Lord said, "Chris, that is the thing you need to learn." So for
Hey,
2 years, I read every marketing book I could get my hands on. I was digging into marketing, and you know what? I love marketing now. And then people said, they'll be like, "Can you help me with this? You're like an expert marketer." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because for me,
oh,
I
we just
hated
read
this
the
thing.
books. Yeah, I feel that way a lot when so I behind the scenes I do a lot of executive coaching, and it was like never a plan. But it just kind of it orchestrates that way. God orchestrates it and puts certain people, and they're like, "Hey, can we talk to you about this or that?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I feel that way about that. Like I feel very unqualified, but then we'll walk away from meetings that we have, and they're like, "That's exactly what I needed to hear. This is exactly what I needed to do," and I'm so grateful. And then 3 months down the road, we hear about this happened and that happened, and I'm like, "Okay, well, I mean, I don't know what I said or what I did, but it seems to work somehow."
Right.
So on our social media marketing, I was telling people, yeah, we do executive coaching. And so Miss Amanda, one day she's on LinkedIn and she sees this graphic for our executive coaching. And she says, when did we
We
start
do
coaching
what?
executives? And I said, what do you think you've been doing? When they call you and they ask you and you tell them, I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to call you and email you and follow up with you. And we're going to get through this together. And I was like, what do you call that? That's
Yeah.
executive coaching. Yeah. You offer it. You've been offering.
Yeah, I had to do, what do you call that when you have to do a self-examination? I had to kinda look back and go, "You know what? I've been doing this for a long
Yeah.
time," and didn't really know exactly what's the name for that or what do you call that. So, but that's a good example too. We'll stop right there for a second. That's a really good example why it's a really important thing to have a good team because Sloan saw something that I didn't see. I was just doing whatever I needed to do that kind of came naturally, but then she saw that as, "Oh, no, you're actually doing something. This is something that you're doing." And so that's why it's important to have a good team that recognizes things that you don't sometimes recognize. And because it wasn't in my plan, right? So,
And
it's
and just, as a real-time example for me, like, I have been kinda tangled up in my head for a while because and we'll once again, we haven't even gotten to some of this stuff, but it's
I
like what I've
know.
done for the last 10 years. There's so much content I've created. There's so many resources I have available to help people with. I'm actually meeting with a coach next week. I reached out to a guy that I really respect this week and said, "Can we have a session just to help me organize all this stuff?" Because it's hard sometimes when you have a lot of things and options that you can do about how to structure it and organize your thinking and organize your offers so that it makes sense to the outside world. And so for me, it's like people probably heard it's like, if coaches need coaches, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I think we all do, right? I think there, and it may
Yeah.
not be forever ongoing thing. It could be like a one-off thing sometimes, like help me with this project or the situation. Sometimes it's just that ongoing kind of keeping me centered and grounded on what I need to do. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
because we don't see in ourselves what others can see for us.
100%. And I've had several people since we started to ask me, like, well, what is it? What is it that you're doing? And I'm like, I am currently doing what God tells me to do. I'm not really sure because I think I want to do this, but this is not what, it's kind of like what you're saying, like, it's not where my heart is or where I thought it was, is not where God's heart is holy. And I want to align up with what He has for it. So it's interesting because, when the podcast came around, it was like, okay, well, I have never been the front facing person. I've always been everybody's back facing. If you need it done in the background, I've got it. And so this has been a challenge for me just to be really transparent so we usually record on Fridays. And we typically record ahead of time. And so when it gets to Friday, I start stressing out. I'm getting panicked. I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I can, not that I wouldn't even say that it's that I can't do it. It's just, I don't know what to expect. And I think that I was thinking about this the other day. This is one of the refining moments I think that God's working on me because I don't know the expectation. I don't know what the conversation will really be. I can't control it. And so God's like, that's okay. I got it. It'll go. And then we'll get off of a recording and I'm like, that was the best conversation ever. That was so fun, and I loved it. And every time Sloane's like, "You say that every time," and I'm like, "I know." But it's the work up to it, I think, and I don't really know. Like, there's people like you that we're closer with, that there's a better expectation. And then there's some people that have asked to come on the show, and I don't know these people, and I'm like, I don't
Right.
know, what to expect or what to
Yeah,
ask.
you
And
don't have
so,
you don't have the same rapport with them built up already
right.
and everything. So yeah,
Yeah, and it's
absolutely.
kinda like that lump in your throat, and you're like, "Am I gonna mess
Mhm.
it up?" But on
Yeah,
the bright side, we pre-record, so, we
that's
could
right.
just
There you
not
go.
we could not, but we haven't done that yet, but, well, I'm gonna let Sloane take over for a minute and ask some questions of you, Chris, and we're gonna get just a little better idea of what it is, and then we are going to talk about your books here in a little bit. I do want to talk about them, and go over a little bit about that, but I'll let Sloane have the floor a little bit.
So you have a unique experience. Not many people can say, I was a pastor for 20 years and now I'm in this executive space. But doing that, 20 years as a full time pastor, what did ministry teach you about leading people that most business frameworks they miss?
Yeah, I think a lot of it for me when I think about that, I hear John Maxwell in the back of my head from back when I was a pastor and a young leader. He said, if you want to grow as a leader and really test your skills, lead in a volunteer organization that when people don't have a paycheck attached to them and that you don't have leverage, right, because of the money, you have to lead in a different kind of way. And that's probably the biggest thing I learned all my leadership experience from the time I was 18 years old going into college and beyond in those 20 years in my roles was based on volunteer experience. So I had to lead from a place of caring for people. I had to lead from a place of trying to help them achieve their goals and vision. It wasn't just about what I needed or wanted or our church needed. In fact, there was a woman and had been teaching Sunday school since she was like a teenager. She was in her 60s. So she'd been teaching Sunday school like 50 years at this point. Okay. I went to her. I just come to our church where we moved here to Ohio to serve in. And I came here we moved here in the beginning of June. And so I think it was that summer. And then like going into the school year, I went to her like in, let's say, July or August. And I said, Linda, do you want to keep going next year? Like, do you want to continue on? And she said, Chris, nobody has ever asked me that question. they've just assumed that I'm going to keep. And she's like, of course I'm going to do it. She's like, I've been doing it since I was 15 years old. And I'm like, no, I said, that's fair. I said, but I always kind of had a policy of asking. I didn't want to assume that everybody who said they would help with a youth group or the teaching in a kids class or whatever role they were in, volunteering, that they didn't sign up for life necessarily, right? Not everybody does. And so for her, that was her heart, that's her calling, and she loved it and was great at it. But nobody had ever asked her, are you good or do you need to take a break? And for me, that was really an aha moment or a pivotal moment for me to realize what I was doing just kind of intuitively at that time, asking people was really important. And so I think that's part of it, Sloan, is in business, there obviously any leader in any organization of any kind can make a lot of assumptions. I think at the same time, caring for the people and making sure that, Jim Collins talks about in Good to Great of, are the right people on the bus? Are they in the right seats? Get the wrong people off the bus, or sometimes help people move off the bus to a better situation even. And I had to do that as a leader. I mean, we had a staff member at a church and he'd been there 10 years, had done a great job, but he was burning out and we would have these one-on-one conversations. I was leading him and we ultimately offboarded him, but we did it in a way it helped him, his family, and the church simultaneously, because it wasn't like we didn't fire him. It wasn't that he didn't need to be fired for anything,
Right.
but he didn't know how to let go, and so we walked him through that process. And then I had another employee that similar situation, 10 years, and she felt terrible because she felt like it was time to move on, and I'm like, it's completely okay. Like,
Yeah.
that's when I learned about, hey, things happen in seasons. So I think
Yes.
for me, when you're in that environment of, it's got to be about caring for these people, and some of those were staff situations there, but many of them are volunteer situations where they could have just quit today and it wouldn't have affected them whatsoever, but I would have been behind, trying to pick up the pieces. But a lot of it was, do you really care for your people and do the best for them? And so I think in business that gets lost a lot because of all the deadlines and pressures and all the things.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with that. And I think of all the things, I do not do fantastic at all the things, but this is one thing that I try really hard. And I don't know if it's just based on, you know, my raising or if it's through different processes I've been through different jobs in my life. But I try really, really hard to make sure that the people that I'm working with enjoy what they're doing. They really want to be in that position. And I agree with you on, if it's your time to move on, if God's giving you a different path, that's okay. Let's support you. Let's raise you up in that. And let's do what we can to support you in that. I think that's so important. I think that you're right. It's truly missed in business. The role that I was in before, I had kind of grown outside of it. And that wasn't a bad thing, but I kind of had the same thing. I had been working in it for so long and it was so comfortable. And so, I wouldn't say easy as in like it was,
Right.
I wasn't but I had kind of worked out of it, but it was hard for me to see the whole picture of it. And so I talk to the ladies, Sloane and Amy, that work for me. And I tell them quite a bit, hey, I want you to like what you're doing. If you're not liking what you're doing, we need to figure something out. One of my favorite books of the Bible is Ecclesiastes, and I go back to that all the time. Like, there's a season at a time. And I think I really had to embrace that when we were walking through the journey with my mom's cancer and losing her. Is like, this is just this is just a time. It's not forever. I'm going to see her again. And really, really learning that hardcore lesson of, things do change. They don't always go as planned. And we do, have to just follow God's lead in that. So that's really good. I'm really glad you brought that up. All right, Sloane, what you got next?
I want to talk about the magnetic leader. Miss Amanda and I got those, and I started with magnetic leader. She did too. It's really good. If you don't have a copy, you need to get one, and we'll make sure that you have the link below for that. But I would read it at night, and I kept telling my husband, "Oh, you've got to read this. It's so good." And then I would read a line or a paragraph, and I'd be quiet, and then I'd read a line or a paragraph. And he said, "If you keep reading it to me, I'm not gonna have to read it. I'm just
You're just,
like, I'm
you're
gonna
my
have it all
audiobook.
by the time you're done." And so
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna stop because I really do want you to read all this." But in that, you break down 18 essential actions. of leaders people love to follow. And don't give away the whole book, because
Yeah,
I want people
sure.
to buy the book and read it for themselves, not let their spouse read it to them out loud. What is the one action most leaders skip, and what do you think it costs them?
So, it's interesting because I think we could obviously skip any of these on one level and, without thinking about it. I think the one that people don't think about the most, and the irony of it is it's right in the middle of the book. And I didn't make it this, but it came to me later, like it's kind of the heart of the book is essential action number 9, which is loving people.
Mhm.
And I think that is, and it goes back to what I was saying before. Do you care for the people you're leading enough to do what's best for them, not just what's best for you? And I think that's, all the other actions are great and they're needed, but I think that if you don't get that one right, then the other things, they're not going to at least have the same kind of impact. You could
Yeah.
still do them, but why, for instance, why would, like chapter 1, why would you meet needs of people if you don't care for them?
Right.
Why would you give generously to people if you don't care for them? Why would you develop people if you don't care for them? Like there's all these things, right? Like these other actions. And so, like I said, I didn't intend. So this is one of those, maybe God just did it, and placed it right in the center of the book. And, like, hey, right in the heart of all this, in the middle of it all is loving people. Because honestly, let's see. I mean, and even in the book, I talk at the end of each chapter, there's a section. I wrestled with putting this in, honestly, the way I did. But at the end of each chapter, there's a section called Jesus, the Ultimate Magnetic Leader. And I talk about how he did these 18 essential actions from what we see in scripture. And loving people is the starting point, right? If he didn't, for God so loved the world, he came, he gave his begotten son. It's like, so if God didn't love us, he wouldn't have sent Jesus. And if Jesus didn't love people, he wouldn't have done everything he did in ministry and then sacrificed himself on the cross. So loving people is the core and the heart of it, so that the other actions are coming from that place of true care and concern. And I address that in the book. Is this seems like a very weird topic for business, right?
Yeah.
But you have to look at, but we set up these professional boundaries and walls and all these things in business so many times. You don't have to cross barriers, right? You don't have to do this in a very weird, way, right? But caring for people, I think people like just look at the term love and they think the erotic, or they think
Right.
the marriage relate, all the things, right? Like it's all about and it's like, no, it's about, do you genuinely care for people's best interests? And if you do, then you'll do these other things.
Yeah. So this is probably going to be my most exciting part of the conversation because I've been waiting for this. So when we first got connected with you, you actually reached out to us. You saw the stuff that we were putting out, the company and the podcast. You said, "Hey, I want to be on it." And so my original plan is that we had immediately ordered your books because I got to know what you're about. I got to know who you are because I don't know who you are. And so I gotta know about you. And so we ordered the books, and I dove into the Magnetic Leader to begin with. And in my mind, I'm just gonna run through it. I'm gonna get through it. And I just really felt like, well, first of all, let me say, the first thing that I noticed was that each chapter ends with this: Jesus is the ultimate magnetic leader. And I was like, oh man, okay, God. Like this, because this is kind of the same trajectory of what we've been on the path with IOL. And I thought the same exact thing, like this must have been a challenge to put this content in here, because this isn't what I expected when I picked up this book. But I'm going to tell you, it was so refreshing to me. And I thought I was going to blow through this book, and I haven't. I have systematically, and I think with God's direction, just slowly read this book and really, really just soaked it in. One, because I need to, I think, I'm not just going to say me, I think we all need to become a better leader. And there's all kinds of ways to learn how to do that. And I'm sure people could say, "Oh, we're shamelessly plugging your book." I am, but also because it's good. It is really good information, and I really had to stop at each chapter and just really, really think, okay, am I doing this? And if I am I doing it well? And if I'm not, how do I do it? And to really kind of soak in, there's many chapters in this I've reread several times and just stopped and soaked it in and said, okay, how can I do better or be better? And there's some of them I was like, oh yeah, I'm killing it at this one. I
Yeah,
got this one.
right.
And so it's really, really good at just the perspective. Am I doing, and I want to be clear too, that like I sit currently in a CEO position, for whatever you want to call that. I don't really know what the worth of is at this point. But I say that because it's not just for me. It's for my team. It's for other people. It's learn how, because there's all kinds of different leadership positions. But I think that the heart of it and what I love so much about it is that it goes to back to Jesus is the ultimate leader, and he is. And that's kind of been, it was just really refreshing to open it up and see it. So whatever hesitation you had about it, which I know that comes because it came from me. And we've talked about this in other podcasts when I started the company, and I just really felt so heavily the Holy Spirit was like, your tagline is going to be serve God, serve people. And that was difficult for me. Not because I don't want to serve God, not because I don't want to serve people, because I've come from a corporate background like you. And it's just, it's, what are people going to say about that? But the things that people have said about it have been amazing. And just solidified what God had put in my heart, that this is really where you need to go. And so when I picked up this book and I opened it, I was like, okay. And just God is so good. And it is amazing. We're not going to give it all away because we do want you to buy it. But it is truly one of the best books I have read about leadership. It's really well written, short bite-sized kind of pieces, which I like. That's one of my favorite things, where I can just kind of take that chapter and kind of marinate on it for a little bit. And then I don't feel like I'm lost when I pick it back up. And I really, really like that. So kudos to you. Did good. I have not read the second book yet. We were just talking about, I finished this one finally. We have a unique situation that we have a lot of people with books that are contacting us. It's funny, not funny.
Yeah, trying to keep up with everybody's books, right? Like,
I know. I'm like, well, I can only read so much at one time.
yeah.
And so we try to move through, what we can, but it's been a blessing too. We have so many strategic partners, clients that have amazing books. And so that's been a real blessing, and such a blessing to contact with you too. So anyways, I had to kind of put that out there, because I can only imagine what the hesitation was, not because your heart wasn't in the right place, just because I know, coming from the same kind of situation, like how difficult that decision is, that, God's telling you to do it, but you still, you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. So I say to you, kudos and well done, because it really spoke to my heart, and there is no better leader than Jesus's leadership. So we can learn so much from that. So anyways, I'll give it back to Sloane.
So now I'm ready to talk about The Way to Greatness. And like Miss Amanda, I haven't jumped into that one yet, but I am really excited. So that one, The Way to Greatness, focuses on 5 core areas that hold people back. And that's faith, relationships, mindset, stewardship, and time. How do those areas show up inside an organization when you have a leader that hasn't done the personal work in those areas? What does that look like?
Yeah. So once again, the whole journey of my business, that I talk about, and even I still, it almost feels silly. Like I'm like 11 years in and I feel like, okay, duh, I've missed this, right? Like, but I recently was able to, and once again, God put a woman in my path who, through another connection, that just, hey, you guys ought to talk. You have similar, things of what you do, kind of things. And she really helped me think through, and just it was almost like an intro networking kind of call, but we had this conversation about all the content, all the things I've created, and how does it all make sense, right? And put it together. And so out of that, I'll say, is I came up with 4 phases of what I really teach, and I'm going to continue to develop content around. Is phase 1 is lead yourself. Phase 2 is lead others. Phase 3 is build culture, and phase 4 is multiply impact. So the way to greatness is really about phase 1. It's about leading yourself. Phase 2, with leading others, that's where magnetic leadership definitely falls into play. And then there's future books I got to, already in my mind of what to do for the other 2. But going back to your question, if a leader's personal life, isn't in a good working order, it's going to come to the office. It's going to come to the organization, right? If you have issues that you're dealing with at home, they're coming to the office. You just can't avoid it. And that's the thing I feel like is one of those big misnomers in business, leadership, whatever, is that we can just compartmentalize and leave your work life at work and leave your home life at home. No, we're a holistic one person, right? So if you're having if you have a sick spouse or you're going through challenges at home, if you have kids that are having issues, if you're having health issues or some kind of financial, whatever, all these things will affect how you show up.
Yeah.
And that's where I didn't understand the connection, honestly, Sloane, for a long time. And my friend Mark, who's actually been my editor and even my writing coach, I call him, for both of these books, he has tried to help me for years to understand this. And I have resisted and fought him and all these things, right? Like even when you talk about how it's laid out and all this, and I'm like, I literally, the battles we went through to get these books to print, because he's like, he would just, and he stayed with me, right? He stayed with me and helped me get to this point. And so in each of those 5 choices, I call them, about, build your God core. I talk about in there, when you go to the gym, you build your core so that the rest of your body can be strong, right? So faith is the core of our existence. Now, some people don't have the same faith we would have, but they have faith of some kind. They may not even recognize it as faith, but this is really what I call a faith-based life coaching book of sorts, very biblical, very deep, biblically in it. But, building that God core. Then I talk about protecting your relationships, not just managing a relationship, but truly protecting your relationships. And then I talk about your mindset, right? Renewing your mind. Paul talks in Romans 12 about, renewing your mind, transforming your mind. I go into that. Then I go into, managing your resources, being a good steward, because it's not just about money, even. It's about the stuff of life that we own and possess. And then finally, maximizing your time, because time is the only one renewable asset we don't have. When it's gone, it's gone. And so basically, if a leader is struggling in any of these 5 areas, it's going to ultimately affect what they do when it comes to leading others. And so that's where the connection finally I tell people I'm slow, but I eventually get it, and I'm simple and it'll finally click. But it did. And it finally, and so I think that's where a lot of this comes to play, is the way to greatness is leading yourself in these areas. And then you can be ready and more equipped to lead others well. And that's where the way to the magnetic leader can come into play, about the essential actions of what to do.
So basically we read them backwards. So.
That's what I'm taking from this.
Okay.
But but here's the thing that's funny. It's like, you're right, but I didn't even know that literally what I've ignored. So here's what happened. Literally, I will tell you, if this is the behind the scenes stuff of writing and publishing, right? I launched The Way to Greatness was launched on my birthday, September 6th, 2019. I had a big party. We launched it. It was great. I started writing the Magnetic Leader the next week.
Wow.
And I didn't give The Way to Greatness any airtime after I launched it. And I focused solely on the Magnetic Leader for all these years, primarily since then. And so it's almost like The Way to Greatness is this sidebar thing project I did. And yet what's crazy is, and I joke, but it's true. Like, I've had people tell me, Amanda, I have had to reread this book multiple times, or I've had to reread these, because in each of these 5 choices, I have a 5-step action plan that you go through. So really, they're almost like 5 mini books, I'll call them, booklets maybe, because each one, you can just pick up a section and say, okay, I'm going to talk about the financial side, or I'm going to do from the stewardship side, or I'm going to do the time. Like, you don't have to read them in order, but I do say the build your God core is the centerpiece of it all, to start with, for sure. But my point is that they are really, like, I had a woman, she was one of my reviewers, and before I ever published it, and she said, Chris, you got to give me a workbook. There's 2, because I have a ton of questions and exercises.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, as you're talking about this, I'm thinking, okay, so we haven't read it yet. And I'm thinking my team is going to absolutely love me, because we're about to do like a team. We're going to go through this together, the 3 of us, and walk through this together and kind of, work it out. So yeah, we need a workbook, Chris. Where's the work?
Well, I create a digital workbook. I do have a discussion guide, so I can send that stuff your way, and you could be my test group for some of it.
So then what we'll do, our team will do it. We're going to do the whole thing. Yeah, I'm just going to say it right now. We're going to do it. And then we're going to come back. Our whole team will come back on here, and we'll talk with you about it and tell you how it went. I think that's really good. Maybe it worked out that way on purpose, because I wouldn't have probably thought it otherwise. I probably would have just started reading through the book. So yeah, no, I think that would be really good. That'll be a really good thing for our team to do together. But And I was also thinking too, again, I want to kind of go back to his, because God just kind of really keeps putting that on my heart. Learning about leadership is not just for the people at the top. And here's one of the reasons why, and I don't know, maybe somebody needs to hear this, but how do you know if you're in a situation, a job, whatever the case may be, where you're under poor leadership and you are just kind of enduring it? Because I've been there before where, the leadership isn't great. Now, I've had great leaders, don't get me wrong, but I've been in places where the leadership is not great and I've just endured it, not knowing better because I wasn't well informed at the time. And so I think it's important, regardless of status or place in corporate or however you want to clarify that, it's important that we all learn what a good leader is. One, because, God might have in your path to be a leader. Who knew that you would be where you were, that I would be where I am, or Sloane would be where she is? And who knows what's going to be in the future? So it's important to prepare your heart and your mind for those things. One, because you need to be aware of the situations that you're in. And that way, you can listen to the Holy Spirit and say, okay, well, this is not a good leadership position. I really shouldn't stay here, shouldn't have to stay here. And also, I think a good lesson from what you're talking about is sometimes you have to jump out and take that leap of faith, right? And do something different, even though it wasn't what you thought should be, or it might not be financially comfortable, it might just be something that you have to do regardless, or that you should do. So I just kind of was throwing that. I felt like that was, I don't know. I
Yeah.
felt like that was on my heart. Like, you should
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, and I think too, I think the one thing is you can only control what you can control, right? And you can't
Yeah.
control other people. You can't. One of the first leaders I worked under was he was a hard worker and he did a good job at what he did, but he was not a great leader of the team.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was my first full-time ministry job. I was youth pastor. I was hungry to learn and grow, and I had mentors that were challenging me to keep growing. And I sat down with him, and I'll never forget. I was at this restaurant with him, and I was frustrated with the state of things and I was trying to be honest and open with him. And he said, "Chris, your problem is you read too much." And I was 25 years old at the time. And that was the exact moment I resigned in my brain. I knew I was done. And the reason I was done was because two of my mentors, who we'll talk about later, I think, is they basically told me when I was coming out of high school, "Chris, leaders have to be continually growing. Leaders are readers." Yeah. And so that was what and I believed it because I was experiencing it. And then I
Yeah.
have this guy who I'm reporting to tell me that I wouldn't be as frustrated if I didn't read as much. And I'm like, this makes no sense to me. So you're right. So you might run into those situations, but to me, it's like whether it's about your long-term path or whether it's about, just controlling the controllables,
Hmm.
every one of us, we have to take responsibility for our own development.
Yeah.
So it's that kind of thing that we just need to.
But I think you run into situations like that with that individual. Like, there are people that you're going to run into through your lifetime, and especially in business, that do not want you to succeed. They don't want you to become smarter. They don't want you to become better. And so you need to surround yourself with the people that go, yes, I want you to do better, and I want you to learn better, and I want you to read, and I want you to know.
Yeah.
But you are going to encounter people who don't want you to know. They don't want you to know how to rise above, or to be better, or to grow, or to flourish in the situations that you're in. And so it's important that you learn that in that path, so that you can recognize it and go, this is not the right place. So let's just talk just a little bit about, and then we're gonna be respectful of your time and other people's time too. But so on the other podcast, you guys talked about how, you came to know IOL and to know my dad and Dr. Leander, and how that all came about. So if anybody wants to know that backstory, they can go and listen to that other episode. But then now you had kind of reached out when we opened IOL, and we were kind of going back and forth and looking at the books and the different things you do. You have a lot that you do. You're very, very busy. You have courses on your website. And we want to just implore everybody to go check it out. You also go into businesses and you do speaking and training. So I want you to talk a little bit about that, because we kind of chose in our discussions to do a strategic partnership, because we believe in what you're doing and what you're putting out there. And so, and we don't take that lightly. We're very careful. I wouldn't say we're snobby. We're just careful about, the people that we're partnering up with. And so I want you to talk a little bit about what is it that you're teaching and training. I know it's leadership, but I want you to give us a little bit deeper dive. If somebody was interested corporately or small or large business, what would that look like? What is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I do work one-on-one with mostly the executive ownership levels. I do some one-on-one with managers as part of a program if they need more one-on-one help. For instance, right now I'm wrapping up a series of one-on-one with a young leader. She's 28. She's in a big global company out of Germany. She took on a very big project management situation that was it was a development thing for her to stretch herself as well. She's done a great job, but she was a young leader saying, "Hey, I know I've never done this, so I want to grow and make sure I have support along the way." So, working with her, working with small business owners who are just saying, "Look, I don't have a sounding board, on my team because we're very small, or I just need to have somebody outside." So I do one-on-one executive coaching, that side of things, really just being that for them. As far as training wise, I have my magnetic leadership, what I call an academy, is basically walking through my magnetic leadership content. I've recorded it. I have a video course that component to it where the participants will watch lessons and, they have a workbook with that. And then I'm actually creating and enhancing it now with creating some more tools for each of the 18 essential actions that I think
Awesome.
are going to be even more beneficial to participants and, people that even just buy the course and do it on a self-study basis. Yeah, but like I said, with the Maxwell organization, I'm licensed to teach a lot of John Maxwell's materials, and so
Mhm.
I'm getting ready next week actually to go into a credit union and teach 35 of their managers on John
Awesome.
Maxwell's book, the leadership content about adaptability and flexibility as leadership. So I'm getting ready to go do that, which is exciting. So I have his resources that I'm licensed to use. Lunch and learn, brief presentations. If you're saying, look, we just need something fresh to do with our team. Corporate retreats where you're saying, "Hey, I just want to give we're going off site. I want to have some leadership and personal growth training." So I kind of do, I really try to customize, to the need of my clients. So you know, I don't like to try to just create one thing for one time per se, but at the same time, it's like, how do we implement and facilitate? I can do the group coaching on Zoom and we can do group coaching calls. I do it that way. And then
Right.
I also do in-person workshops and speaking engagements too. If you have an association or an industry gathering that you're saying, "Hey, we need a speaker on a topic or a breakout session." I've done a lot of those over the years as well. So a lot of it just comes down to kind of what is your event or what is your need, and then we'll figure out together what's the best content for your goal. And that, like you said, because I've got my own books and courses and resources for sure. I also the Maxwell. There's a lot of things I can bring to the table, but I always want to make sure it's serving you as the client best on what your goals are for your event or your team.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I really love about the work you're doing and your model there, is that it's really tailored to what the organization or the person needs, instead of just being, "Hey, this is just this one thing. This is what I have." You're really, really good about tailoring to what the needs of the people and the leadership and their team
Yeah,
needs.
I don't like to force fit people into
Yeah.
something and say, it's because for me, honestly, it's like if I show up and they don't really care about it, yeah, you might get paid to do it. But I'm like, what's the real impact of that? And I'm, I look at, and I started this from day one is when I sit down with people to talk about whatever we're going to do together, it's like, I can come in and do one-off things to help you, but I'd rather have a partnership with you to develop your people and to help you as an individual or your team. So to me, that comes back to, I think the heart of how I want to run my business is, it's not just about jamming and force fitting people into a box. It's what's best for you. And sometimes people come to me they have this idea, but I'm like, you know what, maybe we ought to do this instead of that because of this. And they're like, makes total sense. So they can have an initial idea that might get even morphed and shifted a little bit. But once again, I look at that as a very collaborative approach of what's best for your team and what your goals are.
Yeah, agreed. And that's, yeah, like I said, one of the things that I really love about what you do is that it's not a one size fits all. It's like, let's make it work for what you have going on. All right, well, we're gonna wrap up. Sloan, I'll let you go first.
All right, Mr. Chris, who has had the greatest influence on your life or your leadership style, and why?
Yeah, I alluded to them earlier, but it was my senior pastor and my youth pastor at my home church. D. Campbell was the pastor at our home church for 40 years. Tommy Baker was our youth pastor he was a youth pastor for like 25 or 30 years. And so they were long-term leaders in our church. They worked together for a long time and they grew the church and it was a very welcoming and amazing place for me to grow up in that environment. I took it for granted, obviously, at the time because I just thought that was normal and what I experienced, and I realized later it wasn't. So, but they were both very instrumental. In fact, my wife and I are married because of them. You know, we were on a bus trip to watch Kentucky play Tennessee in basketball, and that she was getting on the bus with her family. It was a church trip we took every year for a while, and they were like, "You need to be hanging out at her house." And I was like, "Who are you talking about?" And she was a couple years younger, and we met on that trip, and we started dating the next week, and we're getting ready to celebrate our 25th anniversary, and we've been together 31 years since then. So, you know, but
Congratulations, you guys. It's awesome.
thank you. Yeah. So anyway, but once again, they modeled for me all these things I'm talking about of being a continual growing leader and learner, and then helping other people be the same. And so they were the foundation. Like once again, I've had other great people I've worked with along the way too, but if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right. So we typically ask, when you think about legacy that you're building, what do you hope people will say? And I think I'm going to let you answer too, but I want you to know that I believe you've already built a legacy. You've built something that people can take with them. I mean, it's not just a book that I can put in my bag and carry with me. It's the information that I need to be a better leader, or to know what a good leader looks like. When I encounter one that's not, or that I can help mentor and help shape people. I think you've already created a legacy in that. And I love what you're doing. The more that I dive deeper into the stuff that you've written and the stuff you're doing, just the better it gets and the more I learn. And so, yeah, I think we had this conversation so that maybe I would have our team do this walkthrough the next one instead of just doing it individually. And I love that. But I'll let you answer too, and then I'll let Sloane follow up with closing us out.
When I started to really grow as a leader, I had this image in my mind that I said, I want to be the wise old guy when I'm 80 years old that people come to and seek advice and counsel, and just be the guy that's worth coming to, right? Like that was literally at 20 some years old, I was thinking that, 50, 60 years down the road, I want to be that guy. John Maxwell said something, and I used to have this I printed up on a piece of paper to put on my wall at my first job, was there's no success without a successor.
That's
And
good.
to me, that is like for me, it was like, actually, when I left that youth pastor job that I was telling you the story about,
Sure.
the guy who followed me did a much better job than me, quite honestly. But he was a friend of mine, and I recommended him to be considered, and they hired him, which I thought they were very wise to do, and he did a great job. And he was a little bit older than me. He had more experience than me already, but I really had seen what he had done in our community, because he was a young life leader in our community. And then he became youth pastor at the church after me. And I was always thrilled and excited to watch how they were growing after I left. I'd been there 4 years. I think he was there, I forget, 5 to 10 years, somewhere in there. But I felt like I came in and I built on a foundation of who had built before me. And I wanted to make sure that when I left, I wanted to leave well. And I wanted to make sure that, as much as I could control, that it was passed off and handed to somebody else who would build on that. And that was a very good picture for me of it being done well. And to me, it wasn't like I wasn't responsible for him being a great leader there, but it really just reiterated that the succession plan matters. And so for me, from a legacy standpoint, for me, I've got a 20-year-old son who's a sophomore, finished up his sophomore year in college. I got a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate in a couple weeks. I've got a daughter who's a sophomore in high school. So I look at it from a family standpoint. Obviously, I want to build a legacy that they want to, see me as a model. Well, my grandfather was actually dying of cancer when I was 14 years old. I watched him live out his faith in a way that I'd never seen anybody do. And I had accepted Christ when I was younger. I'd grown up in a Christian home, but it was when he was dying was when I realized I want to be that guy
Yeah.
when I'm his age and beyond, right? And I saw him and my dad is 10 years older than him even now, so he's had a healthier, longer life, thankfully. But my dad has been not an exact replica, but the characteristics that I see in him and my other uncles are like what my grandfather had modeled and done. And now I want to be that, right? And carry
Right.
that forward and my kids to carry that forward. So for me, it's about just being every day, living the life of faith that I have and being an example. And just like you say, there's these hard days where you're like, I don't think that like I don't even know what I'm doing. Like, what in the world is happening? And then I have these conversations with people and they're like, Chris, what you said here, what you did there. And it's like, it made such a difference. I'm like, we need to hear that, right? We need to
Yeah.
speak that to people too, because people don't hear it enough of how they are impacting people. And so speaking that life into people, I think is huge. And for me, I'm not that I'm perfect by any means about doing that, but I'm trying to be intentional with it and being a model. I do daily videos on Instagram and LinkedIn I put out there, and they're like 2-minute videos and they're
You're
certainly
great.
not highly produced or anything, but it's like, you know what? I put it out there and I'm like, you know what? Somebody needs to hear this probably. And I don't know who they are. I don't know when they need to hear it, but you know what's funny? I do those videos thinking about executives and leaders. You know who's following me that I didn't even imagine? Teenage friends of my kids.
And they're probably learning so much from you, and that, you don't even know the impact. I think you're really doing an amazing thing. And I think that sometimes we're doing amazing things because of, and in spite, we don't even know that we're doing those things, And so, kudos to you. It's such an honor to be in contact with you and to learn from you and to grow and have these conversations. I have no doubt that we're going to have more of them. And so, yeah, I just thank you for coming on today. And like I said, it's like I kind of work myself up to these conversations. I don't know what to expect. And then we have it. I'm like, that was so good. I loved it. So,
Yeah,
Sloane, I'll let you.
you can only prepare and plan for what you can. Let it go, right?
I know. God is really working on me.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining me and Miss Amanda today. And we'll make sure that everybody has your website. They can find you on LinkedIn. We'll get you those links to his books. If you haven't signed up for his Magnetic Monday newsletter, we're going to have that link for you. It's great. Miss Mann and I both get it, and we learn something
Yeah.
every time. And then also, Chris has his own podcast, so we'll make sure that you can find that.
Yep.
Be sure to like and subscribe on your favorite listening platform so you never miss an episode. Go ahead and like and subscribe for Chris and for Lead with Legacy
Yeah.
here. But you can also support this podcast so we can keep bringing you conversations like this one, and the support link will be below. But thank you to Chris again. Thank you for your time. Thank you to our listeners. We hope that this conversation means just a fourth of what it meant to us this morning, and we appreciate everyone's time. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah, it's funny
Tread
too, because
one.
I'll get on the conversations. I feel like we could keep going for 3 hours, but I know people don't want to listen to us for 3 hours. But I'm so grateful. Sloane, thank you for your time today. And Chris, thank you. Let's come back on when we get done with The Way to Greatness and we'll talk about it. It's gonna be
Absolutely. We
fun.
can do that.
All right.